History is much like an endless waltz. The three beats of war, peace, and revolution continue on forever.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. This season, G vs. Wing, the Swan Song is here, as today we will only be looking at Endless Waltz to conclude Season 1 of Zaku Talk, and that means, for one final time, we are joined by the lovely...
Oh, Bob Scary.
And of course, on the audio boards is Lev Van Rensselaer, reminding me to remind you that you can email the cast at zakutalkcast@gmail.com. Might be a bit before we get to your emails, but don't worry. We will. All right, Bob. I'm going to give out a summary of Endless Waltz, but before we get into that, how's your week been going?
Week has been going pretty well. I have a few things going on the voice acting side by way of the fact that I'm back to streaming. I took about a half-year hiatus off of my own Twitch channel, and I didn't realize how much of an achievement it was that I got affiliate in the first place within 6 weeks. A lot of people, I'm finding, actually need a little more time to get there. So I'm doing more streaming now. I am going to my local, friendly local game store. I did a pre-release of, what's it called? Modern Horizons 2, and I grabbed 2 other sets besides.
You know, I've been meaning to ask for like 2 months. I've been meaning to ask you if you still were doing the Twitch. Thought I might pop in every now and then, but sounds like you weren't. But now you are.
Yeah, I wanted to give myself a breather because I was feeling burnout and overwhelmed in trying to situate everything. Even during the pandemic, it's okay to have your anxiety still flare up, gang. In case you're living with anxiety, depression, etc. out there, I'm with you.
Well, on my end, still moving towards our new production date for the animated film. I've been working, we finally settled on an Unreal Engine artist, and so I've been back and forth with him on some of the set designs. Now that we're at the new date, we might be able to actually film at some sunflower fields, so we were scouting some of those this weekend, and now we just got to see if we can do a deal with one of them. That's sort of the big stuff, prepping for some shoots that will be happening next year, and some maneuvers for after that. Well, that's what's going on with me, Bob. I think now we can dive in to a synopsis of Endless Waltz.
I dare you.
It is the year after Colony 196, and the battles between Earth and the space colonies have ended. Treize Khushrenada is dead, and Oz has come to an end. This gives birth to the Earth Sphere Unified Nation and the Preventers. Seeing they won't be needed anymore, the Gundam pilots, except for Wu Fei, send their suits into the sun. However, this peace would not last, for a rebellion occurs on the newly completed colony, L3X18999. Led by the 7-year-old Mari Maya Khushrenada, Treize's illegitimate daughter, the rebellion kidnaps Relina Dorlin, now the Vice Foreign Minister, during her diplomatic mission to X18999. As the Gundam pilots investigate further, they discover that Mari Maya is merely a puppet controlled by her grandfather, Dakim Barton, a former advisor to martyred colony leader Hiro Yui, who is using X18999 to go through with the original Operation Meteor. Right off the bat, I will say Gundam has super duper trouble making movies.
Now, what makes you say that?
I have never really liked any movies they've made. Their most recent one, Narrative, comes kind of close, but it's too much to put into an hour and a half, 2 hours. Like, you know, we so much has happened in G Gundam and Gundam Wing. It took us 49 episodes to get there. To try to tell a story Gundam wants to tell over 90 minutes, you either have to simplify it down to the point where it's not interesting and doesn't take advantage of what Gundam's themes can do. Or you have to just smush a bunch of things in there, and everything happens so fast and easy that it sort of loses some of its punch.
So I will make a culture note, and again, I'm not a Japanese anthropologist. This is just based on circumstance from my personal reading. As it appears, Japanese cinema doesn't always follow along with the same way that American cinema goes. It is not uncommon for a popular animated series or live action series like my tokusatsu shows to have maybe 45-minute to an hour-long films, but they will often pair them together as back-to-back things. Or in this case, I think you told me this was like a 2 or 3 part OVA at one point.
It was a 3-part OVA initially.
All right. So the idea of having these things feel a little too claustrophobic at times might be due to the fact that they are trying to create the glitz, glam, and spectacle of a full film within a compressed time slot. So it's either going to be dead air, like you're saying, and that's what I'm going to assume a lot of the early Gundam films were, or they're trying to pack a lot of info in a very short period of time, especially if they're doing some course correcting like they did in this.
Yeah, the only one that I say maybe doesn't add enough is the 00 movie. Also, the only other Gundam series to have a planned movie sequel. But like Char's Counterattack and F91 were the 2 movies that came out before. It's just like whiplash. It's like, if this happens, then this happens, then this happens. We don't always know why, or we don't get to let things have an emotional weight. So, like, for all these movies, and Endless Waltz included, I just wish you delivered it in a different way. Or maybe it was a multi-part movie, like what they're about to do with Hathaway's Flash. You know, like, or you just have it be like a 10-episode season or whatever Japan would need to do for their production cycles. Like, I think then you could kind of explore it more. I think there are interesting things in Endless Waltz worth talking about. I just wish you had given all of it the time it sort of needed.
So, to contrast that, I will say that I think for a film that is a continuation of a TV series, it seems to be on par with what I've expected based on, again, watching the movies of all these different shows that I watch. I watch them post fact. I don't get to see them in theaters, obviously, but this ran pretty par for the course. We throw people into situations where they are less equipped than they were when we last left them, and there may be some new perspectives on characters that we didn't have in the past, and that allows us to have a little bit of fan service here and there, but overall is supposed to be just a condensed block of what you like about the show. It's bouillon. It's not very intense flavor, easily dissolved and watered down if given enough space to meld, but we're giving it to you in this jam-packed little cube to work with.
Yes, watered down, I think is a good word for it. Though, to a point you brought up, I do applaud the film for holding off on bringing back the Gundams for a good hour of its runtime.
Yeah.
We get to watch. Sometimes they have to pilot these like generic mobile suits, but I like how much they had to sort of take care of in the first 2/3 of the movie just by being dudes, by being peeps.
Well, that's what the point of this series was and why you like this series at large, because the realistic robo aspect is those are just robots. Those are vehicles. These are characters. You're following characters. Yeah. Are these new versions of the models that we're just going to acknowledge as being the originals for some reason? Sure. Are we going to have a giant mask that goes on the heavy arms? Why not? But one thing I really did like, and I'm only mentioning it here, we can go more in depth with it later.
Yeah.
I like that our Gundam pilots, our G team, if you will.
I will not.
I had to make you hurt a little bit. I like that they did a pacifist fight in that they were stopping these machines as best they could without trying to harm the individuals. We've seen throughout the series that during the war, they would kill mercilessly in some cases as many of these soldiers that got in their way. But during this fight towards the climax, all the Gundam pilots and other friendos of the series were actively avoiding killing, and that's what made the battle more difficult. They set themselves up with a restriction. They could have gone all out and ended it there, but then that would have dissolved the point of what they fought for in the prior year.
Yes, exactly, right? So your show ended on a particular note. You can't sort of just abandon that because it's convenient. So, and it gives our very combat-oriented protagonists a means of having a handicap so that, you know, even though they're only fighting against these mass-produced suits, they have trouble with it. And yes, our mobile suits got a new upgrade for purely aesthetic reasons. The movie does a good job of kind of this information dissemination when they give us these flashbacks, what these flashbacks tell us. The problem is it can become very confusing for the not fully tuned in viewer because the old Death Scythe is just replaced by the new Death Scythe. So you think what you're seeing is happening soon, recentish, concurrently, and it can kind of throw some people off on first viewing. If
you are literate in cinema, it is barely a hiccup. I would like to believe that even if you had not given me that heads up in the prior episode that they were going to do this thing where they were just going to acknowledge these models are the models that were always there, I feel like I still would have gotten it. The only portion of the story that I think would have been a hiccup for me would have been the flashback that we get for Hero. It is easy enough to infer that this is past Hero, but the way in which we get to see him jump the fence and smile for the first time, I think it's the only time we've actually seen him smile throughout the entirety of the franchise.
I mean, he's giving us little smiles, but it's the most carefree, the most fun we've seen him have.
The most childlike smile.
Yes, exactly.
And then it's ripped away from him when he inadvertently kills a girl that gave him a flower just the day before.
I'll touch on that in just a moment, but like the problem is like you're not seeing these flashback scenes and just being like, oh, okay. Like it's not an easy transition. So now I've got to take the time to be like, okay, why would they do this? Is that what they're going for? And like now you've taken me out for these very important flashbacks. So whether you can figure out or not is not the point. The point is you have to take time to figure it out, and it's not a thing you want us figuring out anyway. It's just throwing us off.
I mean, I think I prefer this with not having to do the blur transition in order to go into the past times.
No, that's fine, but I mean, specifically for the duo one, just have it be the old one. You upgraded the new one, fine, great. Just give us 5 seconds of the other one, and it's over.
I'm gonna tell you an awful thing, Skeyhill. It has to do with capitalism. They're selling you the new models. They want to make sure that with the movie, you see the models the whole time, and it's not reminding you of the TV models. You just get to have the new Endless Waltz models. This is your god now.
We're like, we get like 5 seconds of the model at the beginning recap of the show, but like then I don't know, 45 minutes goes by. And now we have to remember that that's what we're doing. I think you're asking too much. There are ways you could massage that if you need to.
It's also 1995, 96 when this movie comes out. I'm going to make a few comparison films to make my point clear. Okay. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie.
Yeah.
They take a bunch of stuff that was never involved in the show and they just throw it at us for the sake of spectacle. And we eat it up as the kids that they're trying to market to. So much so that I was hoping that I'd be able to find the little grappling hook toy that Billy uses in the fucking movie. Something that he never has in the TV series, never uses more than just the one time during the beginning fight, and that's it. We have things that come out like, heckin', I'm trying to think of other major television series that were turned into films in the States. Without having to rely on like, well, why don't you just look at X property having the movie? Because that's a common thing, is having a lot of these movie version only things because it sells products and it makes you have to go see the movie.
For 8-year-olds though, like they don't need to follow they don't care about following the intricacies of this political plot that's happening here. You jump around
Says
wherever.
I feel like our Maria Maya would absolutely follow this.
Yes, the old trope of the creepy little girl. Glad we're still playing that out. So, like, I don't know. I remember when I first watched this movie on the Cartoon Network, where it was its second highest rated viewing ever.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what's going on. I hadn't even seen the full show. I don't know some of these names they're referencing, but I'm just like, yeah, I'm just watching it. I'm living in the present as an 8-year-old. You're just like, whatever's coming at you, you're fine with. And then when I watched the movie, it was the first anime I bought.
Yeah.
When I had just gotten the DVD player, it was like 2004. And the first thing I wanted to buy was the Endless Waltz was at the Sun Coast. And I wanted to buy that. And like I'm watching it and I go, what the fuck is happening here? So now I've matured and I would like to follow cause and effect, and I'm a little confused. The OVA money really showing here. Really upped some production values.
Yeah, but there are some other points where I very clearly can see where they skimped. Like, it's not necessarily the matte backgrounds that they're using for, like, the hard backgrounding. That I don't have a problem with. There are moments like we have this glorious animation happening involving the Tall Geese 3, but there is like a 2-second period where we have, like, this effective blob of white and blue in between. It's bookended by the gorgeous animation, but it's literally just having the things back turned around, whatever. But you can see where they have to speed things up by cutting a little here and there. I love the animation, not just the model design, but the fluidity of the motion.
Tall Geese 3, interestingly, despite being a combination of two mobile suits, I really don't care for the aesthetics of the Tall Geese 3.
What is the combination?
It's the Tall Geese 2 and the Epion.
See, I wasn't sure if what I saw with the Epion whip happening was supposed to be because it was attached to it, because I hadn't seen any other real Epion points on it.
Yeah.
Or if it was supposed to be like the ghost of Kushiranada coming around to give them a 1-second buffer to help them out so that way they don't die together after finally getting to see each other for the first time again.
No real thing.
Zex and Noi.
What makes Gundam Battle Assault 2, the PlayStation 1 fighting game, one of my favorite games is because they leaned into the Endless Waltz style of all the machines. When you play as Zex, you get the Tall Geese 3. But you can unlock Trace Kushiranada, and because I don't know why they chose not to give him the Tall Geese 2, but instead they give him the Epion. You got this great character and my favorite character, my favorite mobile suit together for pretty much the only time you could do that. Because everywhere else in video games, Zex gets the Epion.
None of the Muso games, none of the Gundam Warrior Battle Assault whatevers.
No, Trace is only in the third one of the Dynasty Warriors anyway, and he gets the Tall Geese 2 there. Zex always gets the Epion.
He doesn't get he never gets the Tall Geese 1 or the Tall Geese 3.
Does not get
he only ever gets Epion.
Tall Geese 1. No.
Wild.
I know. It's a lot. I don't know why. I bet in that Versus game they have now, it's probably downloadable content. So we're going back to Hero. Yes, I think what we see here, aside from the bear, at long last, the bear from the opening theme of episode 1, we get an inkling of what it means to him, why it's important that Relina kind of picks it up. Like she's unearthing his humanity again. It's this guilt that he had over this thing we didn't know about for the entire run of the series. But also we see his lack of good planning is what led to this big mistake, right? If he had kind of more thoroughly placed these bombs a certain way or accounted for other things happening, it wouldn't have led to this excess destruction of the colony he was on. Which
is why he is overly meticulous from point one, and why we think or why some of us might believe he's a robot or some sort of a clone type thing.
Yep, it's that. He needs him to do a very thorough job. And also, as we hear, as he's walking with this dead puppy, is that Day Kim is making Dr. J reprogram Hero to strip away even more of the boy's humanity. What we're also seeing in these flashbacks is some of these, everybody jokes about, why would all these scientists find 15-year-old boys to pilot it? But what we see is that not all of them were supposed to be 15-year-old boys.
Yeah.
It's explicitly in the Troorb flashback, but Duo was actually just a worker on the the Death Scythe and eventually found out what Operation Meteor was and says, well, F that. And so he blows it up, and he's going to blow it up. Professor G says, why don't you take it and do this new thing we're going to do? It also not explicit, but Catra was not supposed to be the pilot of the Sandrock, but discovers it accidentally and kind of buddies up to Instructor H, and then Instructor H kind of realizes he doesn't even want Catra to know what Operation Meteor is. He just says, here's your new mission, go do this.
Yeah, I do find it interesting, though, who was Troa prior to choosing to take the name, because he refers to himself as a nameless warrior on the battlefield, and that's all he's ever known. Is that ever explicitly stated, or do we just leave him this anonymous, supernatural, ethereal being?
Yeah, so like I said, and we get like 1 second of him as like an 8-year-old piloting a mobile suit in Eastern Europe, but he falls out of the carriage with his family as their family's trying to escape the Alliance persecution. He gets found by some mercenaries as a baby, and they just kind of raise him. And I guess decide never to give him a name. And he's just been piloting, like he says, probably since he was 5, 6. And like that's why he kind of is so good at it. In the first episode of the series, it's kind of easy to miss, but he says like, for the record, my code name is Troabar and something like that.
Yeah, no, I very distinctly remember that.
Yeah, we get a hint that wasn't his name, and then we go from there. It would have been nice if the other characters didn't just automatically already know that it wasn't his real name. You could have had a sequence where they're like, how is Troa Barton involved in this? And then like when you see him, when they have to fight against him in there, like maybe there's a little more confusion there. But that whole sequence is a mess anyway, because it looks like they capture Troa. Like Dakim and Wu-Fei know that he's faking, but then they like let him keep being in the team. Like they don't lock him up. I never understood that. It always annoys me. They're not even an attempt to explain it away.
Yeah, I'd have bought it if they gave me something simple like, I punched one of them in the solar plexus and then ran off, and people just took that as, I'm a warrior for my thing, whatever.
Man.
But I'm glad that you brought up Wu-Fei, because I feel like Wu-Fei's turnaround in this, both ways, feels junky. It doesn't feel viable to me based on the text that they've given us. If I had read the manga and knew that what Nataku meant and whatever, then maybe. But based purely on the text of the television show and the film, the fact that he says something to the effect of, in order to stop evil, I'll become evil to make sure that I'm on the right side of things. And it takes Hiro having a moment of, I'm just going to trust fall into the ocean. Do you know what you're doing is right? You're sure that you want to be bringing warriors back? Because I get the point to your effect here of why Wu-Fei is trying to push for, does humanity deserve this peace? They're just taking without trying to offer their ability to stand up or whatever. I get what they're going for, but it feels puppeted through Wu-Fei, and like how do I want to word this? It feels like Wu-Fei does not quite grasp what it is that he actually wants. I don't know if that is the intent, but it feels less intentional than I would like to see.
The coming out of it at near the end, I think, yes, is too abbreviated. And this is why I would like more time in this movie or as a series. Hiro essentially just sort of gives up. He doesn't see a way forward. Zero's not letting him know what the proper path is anymore. So Hiro just thinks it's all hopeless and just sort of gives up. He's just too worn down. The 15-year-old boy finally emotionally breaks. You don't need the Nataku stuff for this, for really any of the movie. The only thing you kind of miss out is a little Easter egg where he says, "Rest in peace, Nataku," as he blows up the thing at the end. I have no problem, though, with him siding with them, especially since it's Trey's Kushranada's legacy. He's just like all these other soldiers that are like, well, we still want this world that Trey's is doing, that, again, they're misinterpreting through Dakim. And so, like, Mariamea, of course, is who we're pledging our allegiance to. This carries on the legacy. And Troa, whether we want to, whether he wants to admit it or not, has this deep respect for him and viewed him as the better warrior. It's part of his distaste at having won that battle. And it doesn't...
You said
that's
Troa. Do you mean Wu Fei?
Sorry, Wu Fei.
Okay.
And like that, like he comes from a clan of warriors who, like that poor colony, it was already going to be decommissioned by the Alliance, so they were already going to make them give up their way of life. Then it was going to be used in Operation Meteor, and then they have to blow themselves up. Like that colony never stood a chance. So I feel bad for all those people. But
yeah.
Wu Fei comes from this warrior line. He has only been a warrior. I guess he was a scholar at the beginning, but he's become the warrior. He's fighting against all these warriors. He believes in this Trey's ideal that like soldiers are important, these soldiers how honorable and wonderful they are. So he's misinterpreting that. And so like he doesn't want them to not be necessary, and he doesn't want them to be thrown away or discarded or vilified. And though it would have been nice to see some of that in the beginning, again, it's too short. But like I can make that leap enough because of his relationship with Trey's.
No, I do agree with you on that. I feel like
his arc is to learn what Trey's kind of whole deal was anyway, is that he had faith in people overall, and that their best selves came out in fighting, but overall, like we think back to the baby that learned to walk because he didn't let the mother interfere, is that humanity will in the end find, through the will to struggle either on the battlefield or off, the sort of connecting tissue among them, their fullest potential and their ability to bring in a better age of humanity. And like that's why he has to be with those people at the end that Dorothy kind of riles up, because he understands what Trey's did is that soldiers are just there in service of these people, and they're not, and that is just sort of the nature of it. Like it's not about you, it's about this bigger picture. Mm-hmm. But at the end, he kind of gets to team up with Sally Poe again, like they did when they were guerrilla fighting. And he gets to kind of do what he needs to do to kind of keep the world safe, and kind of gets a little bit of his warrior spirit continued. I
do appreciate the idea of the preventers. I will say that when they first started bringing it up and started getting into what it is the preventers do, I was like, so they're fixers. They're non-mafia fixers. That's what we're doing? Okay. I also kind of like the fact that they're using elemental code names, because that just hits me in the right spot.
I know.
It feels good.
Yes, of course, Bob. Yes. I don't know, 10 episodes back or something, I complained about the naming of these mobile suits, these serpents. But today, not today.
They talked about the 13th constellation at some point during this.
Yes, they say, we think we've uncovered the 13th constellation. So I go, oh, okay. It can't be the name we're familiar with. That sort of makes sense to me now. So I'm a lot more okay with it. I've watched this movie like 10 times. It's the first time I picked up on that.
Well, I also want to point out one more thing about them referring to these serpents because of Orphanok. Orphanok being the serpent that eats its own tail, the cycle. And the fact that we really do get to this conceit of the cycle of war, peace, revolution.
Where's Orphanok from? What mythology is that?
I couldn't tell you. I know that Orphanok is the name of this 13th constellation that people were trying to at one point incorporate into the Western astrology cycle, but it is represented by the serpent that eats its own tail.
I've only heard the Norse naming of it, Ouroboros. That's all. I've never heard of this other one.
Ouroboros, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm okay with that.
But yeah, so I appreciate that if this is the case, if I am correct here, and I'm actually doing a little Googling on my side, then that means that they did put a lot of thought into what they wanted the movie bodies to be. And it was interesting to see them have like heavy arms on the arms situation going on.
It actually makes sense, and this is another realization I had this time, for them to be based-ish on the heavy arms, because that was the one Dae Kim's son was going to have, and so in theory, they had the most input on the design of that one. So that I sort of I bought there. Interestingly, in a delightful twist of irony, in one of the prequels, we find that, Hero, as a little boy, has this attack on Oz with his guardian, the assassin Odin Lowe. And that attack injures Treize as he's defending, I don't remember who he's defending, somebody. And while Treize is in the hospital, that's where he meets Leia Barton, Dakim's daughter, and then that's the mother of Marimea. So if Hero had never done that, then this never would have happened. But he obviously couldn't have known. I didn't even know he was attacking Treize because Treize wasn't the leader of Oz at the time. He was just attacking an Oz garrison. The voice actors in the English version of this stepped up their game hardcore. Everybody's, doing way better than they did in the show.
Did you happen to notice whether or not the voice director was the same or if they picked someone else up for it?
That I did not notice, but...
What else did you want to talk about, Skeyhill?
Interestingly, but probably smartly, Catra's the only one who doesn't get to do like this action stuff at the colony. Because he's got to go. It's very convenient that they decided to throw them into the sun instead of self-detonating them, which they ultimately just do at the end because I guess it's too expensive to throw things into the sun.
You'd think.
But he gets a little bit of action where he has to kind of get onto a poorly done CG meteor. Keep that in mind, Marvel, that CG does not age well.
1995 and 96, I mean, we're just barely getting Toy Story and Beast Wars. We are not at that point yet.
No, the point is there's never a point. That's the problem. Like, the CG looked fine when it came out, but it cannot age well like this 2D animation can. Like, that's just the sad fate of it. Like, Advent Children once looked so amazing in 2006, now doesn't. And it's not because, like, we've hit the plateau, like, we finally hit where animation wants to be in CG. It's just we're always going to be making these tweaks to it and making it better, and it's going to make it harder to go back. So
yeah, it's harder to do that
by the
with
time
lines.
Endgame finished up, Avengers doesn't look as good, and it's only going to get worse. So that's my little shot at Marvel. But it makes sense, right? Catra, not really the combatant, so he gets this other side mission, which gives him something to do. Like, they all get like their little missions, but Wu Fei's the only one with an arc. Wu Fei, kind of Relina, but more so, Marimea is the one who kind of has to learn the most over this. And Hero gets to move past some stuff.
Yeah, so I will say to all this, I do think that there is something to Relina getting to have her moment where she's asking the people to rise up. She's not asking for people to take arms. She's just asking for them to fight back. And fighting does not mean killing. Fighting does not mean ending life. That's a common misconception, I think, in these war-torn times of 2021.
Essentially, what had been happening was nobody, the Zex Dre's Dorothy plan almost worked too well, and so everybody's just like, well, we don't want to fight anymore. So I guess Marimea can have it. Relina's like, no, it's guys, you can do it. You have infinite possibility within you. You just have to demand it. And like, they only have these 500 serpent suits that are quickly diminishing. It is, if you don't want to obey their autocracy, you don't have to.
Yeah.
And that's what Treize was always admired in humans, was that infinity that's within them.
Yeah, I do appreciate that, and I appreciate that even for being a little shit for the better part of the film, Marimea does a great job of having the ability to understand her faults and tries to save Relina.
Yes.
She offers herself as a shield to what she now believes and understands about her father's passing. I do appreciate the fact that, as opposed to the dead dog used to imply the dead child for Hero and seeing what effect it had on him, we see this Barton character, Dakim. What does that translate to? I know it's a number thing.
I have absolutely no idea.
Oh, is it not?
My best is 10, but
that's what I would have assumed.
I have no idea.
Dakim just literally kicking the puppy, or in this case, shooting a child, and then being shot in the head by one of his inferiors because you don't shoot a child.
I mean, it's not... Yeah. I love that the person that ends Gundam Wing's final villain ever is some dude It's the perfect way for Gundam Wing to go out. And he's mad about the daughter, especially because he's Treize's daughter. But also, he's listening to Relena and Lady Yun talk about what it is that Treize actually believed. And he's like, oh, shit. And he's like, he apologized. I apologize for betraying His Excellency Treize Kushranada. Yeah. Like, he gets it. Like, I love that this random dude we never saw before, never gets a name. That's so daring of this show and this movie to do, and it's totally satisfying. I'm glad they did it.
Absolutely. What do you think, though, of the idea of just throwing Hiro Yui into Shibuya Crossing instead of being anywhere involved with Relena's life, apparently?
The OVA and the movie have some differences. This ending is one of them. And part of the reason they changed it is because they have two different songs. And for a while, I had wished they had kept the original song for the first time they used the song, which is what's at the end of episode 2 of the OVA, and use this new one for the end of the movie. Though watching it this time, I wonder if it would be better if they were switched. So that forces that ending to be changed. In the OVA, aside from everybody else kind of having different stuff that they're doing, Relena is at like some meeting place or something, like it's this big fancy building, and then she looks up kind of like when Hiro was going to shoot her at the Rockefeller Foundation headquarters. He looks up, he sees her there, they kind of share a smile, and then he like lets the curtain close and he's like walking away. And then he walks away for the dirt, which we just see him kind of walking towards camera in place during the rest of the credits as the song kind of takes us through. And I wonder if that kind of works better. So this time they've changed it where they're nowhere near each other, but they look up at each other at the same time. We know that they're in sync. I think it just kind of gets to leave the door open for a lot of things, as I imagine what they're doing there. But I miss the hero walking, the fade out. It just feels like we lose some steam or energy in our ending.
Sure. I will say that maybe this fits in the same vein, though, of what you like about who ends the final baddie of the entire line. The idea that life goes on. Life is not always going to be a series of victories and losses. There are going to be times where just it ends and people go on with their lives. And that's the greatest sign of peace, is that there is nothing else. There is no big confrontation. There is no big next journey. You just go about your day.
Yeah, like I'm okay. I like the open-endedness of it because it's really the only like thing that isn't put in a nice tidy bow, because they're like, the narrator's like, hey, there were never any mobile suits anymore and peace reigned forever. And you're just like, why are we doing this? You're so lazy, Gundam. For a show that was so great at dealing with ambiguity and complex stuff, you're just like, nope, it's done. Everybody had a happy ending. The end. So I like this one thing that it doesn't fit nicely into that vein.
I mean, that might have been just the producers.
I know.
Filmmakers out there, beware. Producers are your friend that has their knife ready to cut through your work.
Well, there's also like, I wonder if the director was just like, don't make me do any more Gundam Wing. I'm ready to move on to another thing. So guess what? You can't. It's all over. But then they made other novels and stuff. But they don't have Gundams in it, but it's still fun. Like at the end of the episode 0 manga for Gundam Wing that does all the prequels, they have like a chapter that takes place after the movie where like Wu Fei gets them to join up with the Preventers, and like they were going to go on like James Bond, Ocean's 11 type meetings. So like, you know, that could have been neat, but obviously it wasn't popular enough for them to keep going on because they're like, well, there are no Gundams.
Well, it's a great sequel series, but you can't call it Gundam anymore. You know, that's a great spin-off series. If you had a drama live action, you could make that a spinoff, sort of like how Danger Man had a spinoff into The Prisoner. Well, you could do the same thing here.
We can't. It definitely looks like it is, but sadly, the creator has ardently denied it all of his life. But when they made
yell at Patrick McGoohan to get it going.
I know. Interestingly, when they made the unofficial sequel comic to the show that takes place like 30 years later, they do strongly imply that the two shows are in fact related, and not a spinoff per se, but a sequel. I guess it is a type of spinoff, but it's not like this other thing is happening over there. Direct sequel. But they had called it like Gundam Wing, numeral for Gundam Wing, Preventer 5. And like that is fine for marketing purposes, I think.
Sure.
But they weren't in there. other things that change in the the movie is that Dorothy wasn't in the OVA at all. That whole scene, not there. And of course, she has a solid gold truck, just keeping in theme. But you kind of see.
Glad you brought it up.
Yeah, you kind of see the beginnings of this woman that will later become a future head of the Earthsphere Unified Nation. And like she's kind of gotten it too, where she's like, Trey's believed in you people, so I think you have it in you. I just gotta be the tsundere?
Yeah, the tsundere. She's antagonizing with intent, but it's because she's wanting them to have the answer eventually. They need to come to it themselves, but...
Yeah, and so in theory, she should be there with Fu Fei, because that's where all the people went, but, she wasn't in the OVA, so she's nowhere to be seen. Yeah,
so you've seen the split OVA besides the full-length feature film.
Yeah, I've watched them both, and I maybe like a year and a half between them when I did it, because the old DVD I had came with both. That was the special edition.
Yeah.
And I watched the movie when I got it, and then a year and a half later I watched the OVA, but like I'm dumb. I didn't fully realize they were different. So like when a different song plays, I'm just like, what the fuck? Did I misremember the song? Am I going crazy? Then eventually I figured it out, but yeah, I've watched them both. The Blu-ray comes with both of them, but also comes with the Gundam Wing compilation movies, of which there are 4.
I'm sorry, what?
There are 4 compilation movies for Gundam Wing. They're called Even Odd, and there's a part 1 and part 2 of them.
Yeah, you brought this up early on during the podcast, I think.
Yeah, the odds do the recap from about Hero, Troa, and Wu Fei, and then the evens do Duo and Catra.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense, numerically speaking,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah. Duo and Catra are notably, in the beginning of the movie, the only ones present for the launching of the Gundams into space, because they are the most personable of the 5. And they just like hanging out with buds.
Yeah.
So they would hang out with each other. Makes sense.
I did appreciate that Hero was able to show some acknowledgement to Duo this time around, and is kind of cheeky even when he's being a bit of a prick.
Yeah.
In the Japanese, he calls him Aibo, which they translate weird in the sub that I was watching, and say good buddy or something like that. It translates more correctly, albeit still roughly, to partner. The idea of it being like we are a pair that work together well. I've seen it work in a bunch of shows that are generally cop related. Things like Tokusou Sentai Deca Ranger, Kamen Rider Double, which is a detective show. Things like that. They have the 2 characters in Deca Ranger. It's the red and the blue, where the red is always trying to call the blue Aibo, and he would always go, "Don't call me Aibo."
Hero can acknowledge other people's sort of strengths and how they can surpass his own. It's why in the manga he wants Wu Fei to kind of lead the team, and in both the show and the manga he wants Catra to be like battle, tactician, mission control-esque kind of person. He knows Duo is a great pilot. We haven't seen much of that in the series, but he acknowledges it here for the movie, and it's also why he punches out Duo and has him get captured, because he and Troa both know, well, if anyone can get out of jail, probably the rogue of the group.
Yeah, right?
Oh, also not in the OVA is this scene where Sally Poe rescues Catherine and the manager. The manager's not in the movie at all, and Catherine's just there at the beginning.
But it was weird that I like the little bit that they have between the 2 of them when Sally Poe catches up with Troa, because Troa wasn't going to wait for Duo, apparently.
No.
And she
Duo
says,
will be fine.
What?
Duo will be fine. He'll figure it out.
Okay. Heck you. She says something to the effect of, I appreciate the little gifts or the party favors you left behind for me. I like how Duo just gets cheeky about it, and he's like, if you're making fun of me, I'll be mad. If you're being sarcastic, I'll be even more pissed. Something to that effect. Yeah. I'm paraphrasing. I just like that he's like, shut up, you're hot, I know, I don't know how to talk to you, God.
And John, obviously, the Troa of the group.
I know, we've talked about that before, but... The
structural thing that holding off on the Gundams for so long does is this build of anticipation, but also that it doesn't get us bored once they come here. Because basically for the last episode of the OVA, the last 20 minutes of the movie, is most of our characters now have nothing to do, so they just kind of generically fight all these serpents. And so and that gets old pretty quickly. Some people like Micah, they like just watching the Gundam fights, which is fine. There aren't many interesting ones. One of the best, Wu Fei, interestingly, has two of the best ones in most of Gundam. The one he has against Treize, and then this one here with Hero. I'm like really into those. But most of the time they can be kind of boring. I tune them out. When that 2014 Godzilla movie came out, everybody was mad that there wasn't more Godzilla. But I think that's what makes the movie work. Is that, for a lot of it, it's just, brief glimpses through the point of view of the media and our main characters. And then when he comes at the end, it's a pretty big deal. And, we're really pumped to see him battle those Mutos at the end. And it's really cool when he kind of just blows the fire into the thing's mouth. But in the sequel, when it's just, all fighting all the time, it's just hard to kind of keep focus for the duration of the movie. But Hollywood and everybody just assumes they want more. And those are the movies, the Godzilla movies in the history that I've enjoyed the least. I think Destroy All Monsters is a very overrated movie. Godzilla vs. Megalon is an hour of you're really just watching a wrestling match.
There are a lot of people that watch tokusatsu things, whether it's giant monster films or otherwise, solely for the big wrestling match. And if that's what gets you going, that's okay. Some of us like to look a little too deep into the text, and that's also okay.
I just recommend, if you want to maximize your tension and what your audience is getting out of it, writers out there, less is more. Undulations are good. So, we get to wait. Woo, they're here. That's big. And when it's there, we get to just kind of key in.
You get something during the opening credits or, the very first scene after the credits go. You get something maybe towards middle, just after you start getting into second act. And then you let everything big happen towards the end of the film, but not necessarily the denouement.
Yeah, but you have options in a Gundam show, right? So we get this fun space piloting mission as we're trying to dodge the enemy mobile suits. Yeah. That's enough for an adventure sequence. Then you get them fighting in Leos. That kind of buys you some time too. But then you can kind of hold off your Gundams for as long as you can. So there are ways to kind of go around it, but give little teases here and there to the people. And I think that's what the original Godzilla movie did well. A movie that I was only okay with when I first saw it, but then have watched it for various reasons 2 or 3 times since then. And it just sort of gets better. It ages well. And I think part of that is kind of the holding back on Godzilla. Yeah. What I think most people really had the problem with, but couldn't put it into words or didn't realize it, was that your main character was so fucking boring and nothing. Everybody just thinks human characters suck in Godzilla movies, and so we just want monster fights. But what you can find out if you put interesting characters in there is that you have something to hold you over in between the monster fights. That's my recommendation for you. Legendary. Yes, Shin Godzilla, great characters. Original Godzilla, wonderful characters. Godzilla vs. Biollante. Yeah, all of the Godzilla movies with great characters are amongst sort of my favorite. So there you go. That's my lesson for you all out there. One thing that was the most, I began the podcast and I said, Gundam movies not really great. And Endless Waltz, certainly no exception. But what was interesting this time, for some reason, I was just so much more engaged and emotionally moved by a lot of the things in here. I'm really touched in that battle with Wu Fei and Hero's just how many times must I kill this girl? Or Wu Fei sort of being haunted by this ghost of Treize in that battle that happened there. And this kind of subtle PTSD they're trying to inform us of without saying it. Lady Un, getting to live on with Treize in the form of her daughter and teach her all of his lessons and being able to pass on that legacy for the hope of humanity. And Hero just carrying that dog and being dead inside as he's carrying this dog and having to live with the weight of this sin and some stuff that happens in the ending montage. That, I've never been so moved by this movie, and I think a big part of it is the year-long approach we took. I think there's a weight to kind of doing this weekly and doing it like you would normally, although I guess, it took 3 years for the movie to come out after the show ended. Mm-hmm. But living with the show for a year and having it be a consistent part of my life and having that familiarity to it and that thing I could rely on, I think that is such a thing that we lose in this bin culture we're at now. So I would say, young people, just like I talked about with this Godzilla example, you can maximize your engagement and enjoyment of the media pieces you enjoy if you don't cram them all into a day or a weekend. I know it's very, especially for the much younger people, you've grown up in an age of instant gratification, and like you might think that you need that to get your thrill, but try it out. Try this non-binging exercise with these shows, and you might be surprised at the results that you find.
Or you can do what Uncle Bob says right now and do a couple of blocks. When I watch my shows that I download, I get them, and then I have the whole series on a hard drive, but I watch like between 2 and 4 episodes in a sitting. No more than 10, but that's excessive and not what we're trying to get across here. If you do like 2 to 4 in a sitting because you don't want to wait a whole year, that's fine. Do that, and you will still get not necessarily the same level of oomph that Patrick Skeyhill here is telling you, but Uncle Bob says if you do mini binges, 3 or 4 episodes, like the little blocks that you used to watch on Cartoon Network, you'll be fine.
You can do Bob's method. It's perfectly fine. But I strongly disagree with it.
Yeah, and that's fine. We're giving them options, Skeyhill. Yeah.
Like, defend my point, like I got these on Blu-ray, I don't know, a year ago, no, maybe 2 years ago now. I watched them. I still didn't binge per se, but I did like one every day. And that was fine. Then I did the movie. And like that worked fine too. But I don't know, like I'm just, for a show I've watched so many times and I know exactly what's going to happen. And the moments I listed that moved me here, those are my favorite moments from the whole movie. So they're the freshest in my mind, but I'm just getting hit with them so much. Like there's just something to this long-term engagement you have that keeps it from, that just keeps you, I don't know, it's like a partnership you form. And I just don't understand. Like, I just try it out, because like Stranger Things comes out and everybody talks about it for 2 weeks and then everybody forgets it exists for 11 and a half months. And I just don't know why you would want that to be your relationship with the media you care about versus this friendship you could build with these things as your life goes on. Something to think about. Well, Bob, let's go do another very special The Way We Go.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
Bob, where are you going after this? Tell us what some of your future plans are with your life and your career, what your hopes and dreams may be for the coming few months, year.
Well, when you unplug me from the wall and I power down, I'll stay inside the room closet until you're ready to pull me back out for the next Gundam iteration that you want to disseminate with me. More realistically, I am going to be continuing to deal with some of my personal mental health stuff. I'm going to be working on voiceover stuff. So as a miniature version of my plugs, go to my website, go to bobskerryvoa.com, listen to my demos. If you like them, you don't have to be a person who has a project, but share them, because they may change at some point. You can download them and show them off to friends, and you might understand what you could be doing with acting as part of your life. You don't have to go out there and be a voice actor like I'm attempting to do. I'd be happy if I found a different job and just used that skill for things like role-playing games. Something that I do on friends' streams, and I may in fact be doing on my own streams in the near future at twitch.tv/bobskerryvoa, and watch me there, where I will play video games. I might do some philosophical talks here and there because I like to do just coffee talking, and I might be running some games. So if you are a tabletop role-playing fan, you know who to talk to.
So you have your Twitch. Do you guest star on other people's Twitch? Do you guest star on other people's podcasts?
Honestly, I have not gotten the chance to guest star on other people's podcasts yet, but we are in the talks of talking to some individuals for a possible guest spot on, I'm just going to give their name out because you should be listening to them anyway, Kawaii Disappointment. If you haven't listened to them yet, check them out. It's 3 lovely individuals, 2 of which are weebs, 1 of which is weeb light and hasn't seen a whole lot of anime. They do this really wonderful format where they get first impressions based on a single image. They watch a few episodes, and then they come back and talk about what the preconceived notions are versus what they offer in terms of story, in terms of structure, things like that. It's a little more lighter fare than what you get here with our academic reading of the pieces in question. But I highly recommend you listen to them regardless, and you'll just be in for a fun little treat when you get to hear mine and Skeyhill's lovely voices one more time together before, I guess, you pull me in for build or something like that.
There's an amusing episode of this, a bit in The Simpsons where, like, at some point Homer, like, leaves the bar to go do something, and everybody else in the bar is like, well, all right, Homer left. I guess we just sit here and don't talk until he comes back, and then we just kind of, like, hold on this.
We go into their dormant states. Yeah, I remember that bit.
Pretty good bit. Well, all right. Well, yes, for those of you listeners that enjoyed being with Bob this season, we will have him back in future installments, don't worry, but just not right away. There's a plethora of Gundam fans out there that work in creative spheres, and we want to get you to know them all. Well, Bob, I think we can now take a seat in the Nerd Corner for one final time.
Let's take a walk to the Nerd Corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah!
So for me, this one I had to work for. This one was tricky because my muse, Philip Glass, had a new opera performing in Sweden. But because of the pandemic, they were live streaming each performance. So you could buy tickets. The problem is, as you may expect, the website is totally in Swedish. So
I was just going to say, you didn't use the Google Translate function that pops up when you use like google.du or whatever the SW, I guess, for Swiss.
Yeah. Having shopped many times on Japanese sites for their little trinkets, I had assumed this would happen. For some reason, did not, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. So I spent a lot of time guessing and looking for things that look like their equivalent of a $. I paid 100 seks for the tickets once I found it. I'm not sure how much that is. I think it's like $10 or something. So I had to figure out the conversion. I had to figure out what the time difference was. I had to figure out how to buy the tickets, where to stream it once I had the tickets. But yeah, Philip Glass has done an opera about a circus in the early 1900s based on the poems of a man who watched and worked in the circus for the majority of his life. It was less of what people think of an opera. When they think of people singing, there was some of that, but a lot of it was kind of reciting the poem and watching these circus acts kind of get performed in the middle of it with real circus performers doing very fun circusy things. And it's just sort of about like the temporary nature of the circus. It sets up when you're asleep, and then it's just there that next day, and then it's gone when you're asleep again, and they go from town to town, but those memories always stick with you. And you get to be like you get to be with the narrator in his boyhood and his young adulthood and his old adulthood as he thinks about all of his memories of being and interacting with the circus. Very exciting thing to watch. I don't know when that will be performed again. I got to watch it on the last day, but be on the lookout for that. I don't know, like getting the recording, I don't know how valuable that is. The music's good, but a lot of the opera kind of lives in the circus performances themselves. Well, that's my last Nerd Corner, Bob. What about yours? Like
you, I had to work on it a bit. There's this really cool podcast that I found recently, all right? It's called Zaku Talk. I had to wait a whole year to finish recording it to be able to listen to some of it, because I don't listen to every episode, gang. But I have to implore you, listen to Zaku Talk, at least season 1. The later ones, they might suck because I'm not on it, but you should be listening to at least season 1 of Zaku Talk, and you should be able to listen to it at any of your podcatchers, whether that's Apple or Spotify or whatever. And you can also go and listen to it through YouTube, because there's a whole separate channel from Quixotic United Productions, the film branch of us, which is dedicated to the harmonious sounds of myself, Skeyhill, and many other people, called Quixotic Harmonics.
I do recommend, though, Bob, somewhere down the line, listen to the show, because I've put some Easter eggs in there for you to enjoy.
Yeah, no, I kind of petered off around episode 10, so I will be picking back up at some point, especially as nostalgia starts hitting.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, years go by, I like listening to the old What the Hell Happened to Thems with Joe. Yeah. And be like, that's what we were like when we were 25. Crazy.
Yeah.
Remember when we were young, Bob? Remember those days?
Hey, go fuck yourself. Remember that thing when you were like 15 and I was 18 and we were going to school together? Remember how that was over a decade ago? But in all sincerity, as much as I'm going to miss doing the show, it's more so missing the opportunity to have a weekly chance to annoy the shit out of you while getting my learning brain on. So thank you, Skeyhill, for a good year.
Well, Bob, do you have any final plugs before we wrap up?
Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Scary VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk HQ. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Scary VOA. You can also go to bobscaryvoa.com to listen to my demos, because I am, in fact, a voiceover artist. And if you go to Twitch, go to twitch.tv/bobscaryvoa. Watch me play video games. Not video games like I just messed up, video games. You can also go to a few of my other friends' Twitch sites, and you can watch me play a slew of different characters, such as Ice Edge, a white dragonborn who studied the blade, but actually did study the blade. He's like a neckbeard, but not. Or you can listen to Revolution Salonier, formerly a warlock, now a paladin, who will bring about a cosmic revolution. So, there are a few options.
And of course, we'd like to thank Lev Van Rensselaer for being the audio maven. He said we had to put him through double duty this last year. He had to do this and my other podcast, so we're very grateful for him. And I'm your host, Patrick Skeyhill. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at quixoticunited.com. And of course, now all of our audio-related materials, such as both of those podcasts I just briefly talked about, are available on our sister YouTube station, Quixotic Harmonics. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed both of these shows as much as we did and spending time with us while you watched them. Bob, tell the audience why they'll miss you when you're gone.
I'm not going to give you the opportunity to put in really bad insert song like they did with Friends or Seinfeld or anything, so if you miss me, just you know where to find me. In space. I'm on the stars.